Hey guys, this is Stephen Melin, music composer, and today I'm going behind the scenes of the music for Beard Blade. Now, Beard Blade is a 2D platformer based on 16-bit legends from the Super Nintendo era, and they are currently on Kickstarter. Now, they actually only have, as the time of this recording, 6 days to go. So, if you have any interest in this game whatsoever, head on over and back this project before it's too late. They have a ton of great rewards over on the Kickstarter page, and I will leave a link in the description for that. And you can also check out the team at gloveboxgames.com and their Twitter, which is BeardBladeDev on Twitter. So I highly encourage you checking that out. But in the meantime, I wanted to go behind the scenes a bit on another track. I've previously done the Village theme, and today I wanted to take a look at one of the themes from the demo, which is the boss theme called Maritime Melee. Now, for those of you who have played through the demo, you'll notice that this boss level takes place in, if I can get this thing to load, it takes place in a lighthouse, and once you get to the very top of the lighthouse, there is a boss. He is a pirate bat. And so when I was approached with this initially, I thought it was a really cool idea, and I wanted to make sure that the music was very menacing, but as you can tell, it's a very whimsical game, very comical game too, since our main character here, Branson, aka Beard Blade, he's just a goofy character. And you'll notice how most of this game really reflects the Super Mario games and Donkey Kong, a little bit of Kirby, a little bit of Yoshi. So there's a lot of influences here artistically. And so I wanted to make sure that the music here just really had a nice blend of kind of a goofy sound mixed with, well, a traditional boss theme. And also want to make sure that it kind of retained a pirate style mixed with just something that's a little bit lighthearted. So we'll check back on that later. And I encourage you guys, even if you, since this game is for PC, even if you don't have a PC and maybe you're on Mac, there's a bunch of demo gameplay videos on YouTube right now that you can check out. And so let's dive into this. First things first, I'm just going to play through it once, and then I'll kind of deconstruct it and show you how I came about with this. All right. So typically when I start action type themes, I like to start with the energy, with the motion. And so in this piece, you'll kind of notice I color coded everything by category. You'll notice I have a bass line, an accordion, which are kind of some of the staple sounds for Beard Blade. We have several woodwind instruments, so flutes and oboes. And now that I think about it, I need to recolor the marimba and xylophone over here because they are percussion. So these two guys are percussion instruments, marimba and xylophone, coupled with the timpani, work perk, shaker, and harp. And we have some string instruments, which are brown, and then the brass, trumpets, horns, etc. And that is in gold. So I like to start with the energy, and in this piece, a lot of that is the percussion, and a lot of it is some of the strings. So if I just kind of solo those let you get a taste of what that started with. So let's just start with the lower strings. Pretty simple. Just doing half step chromatic line walk down there to give some energy, and then I just hold out some chords. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm using a lot of chromaticism, which simply means I'm taking notes that go up and down by half steps. And so whether it's fast half steps in the second violins or just the cellos and basses hiking down. And I thought it was kind of cool in this particular theme how I did contrasting ascending and descending chromatic lines. So what that means is, as you can see here, I have the cellos and violas hiking upwards, and then the cellos and basses going downwards at the same time, and it creates this cool sound. Those are out of sync. Let me try it again. There we go. I think it creates a cool tension that you're not going to get if you're always going the same direction up or down with your chromatic line. And then what I did is I took that energy, which is kind of the core of the tune, and I added a melody on top, which is found in the violins. And for those of you who have played Super Mario RPG, that was definitely a source of inspiration because it's very, well, it has a very Spanish sound, a very gypsy sound to it, with a lot of chromaticism and a lot of large leaps. So you can hear that right about here. I just thought that was a cool line that's pretty unique, and it has a bit of a pirate feel, but it's also goofy without being too serious. So I just thought it was a cool sound. And so I took that and I started doubling it with some other instruments, particularly brass. So let's take some of these and solo them, so you can get a feel for what it starts to sound more orchestrated. Right here, the same theme, I doubled it with the trumpets. So it looks like I didn't even want to keep the trumpet as the melody. I actually just put a second trumpet line, which is harmony. I think that works. Whenever you have a really weird melody, it's good to put a nice strong harmony on top of it so it doesn't sound like a mistake when you're doing a bunch of chromaticism. And then moving over to this B section, you'll notice I have kind of zoom out for a second. Notice I have an intro, I have an A section, a B section, and a C section, and then a little outro, and then the whole thing repeats. So it's actually nothing repeats in the theme itself. It's actually technically 3 distinct sections with an intro and an outro. So in this B section here, I use just a doubled low brass with the strings. that's really the meat of it all. But then if you want to really start filling it out, I added, let's see, I doubled the melody with the flutes and the oboes, which I have in almost every track in the whole soundtrack. Typically, flutes and oboes double really well with violins. So that worked out nicely. And then I took, to make this more interesting, I'm gonna unsolo those and just mute select things here. So you'll notice if I just mute the percussion that I added in a bass line, which is very essential, and an accordion in the accordion over here, which basically just doubles the chords, but adds kind of the oompa oompa feel. Which I love. It sounds so menacing. That always reminds me of the Majora's Mask, Legend of Zelda. That's kind of the dark Eastern sound. And then the bass line, pretty simple. Yep. And then the marimba and xylophone, which are very important for the motion. I'm just doubling what the second violins were doing. And one of the things I like to do in the entire soundtrack is with the marimbas or the xylophones to give motion in some of the longer half notes or whole notes. I do little rolls, tremolos. And I make sure to actually play all of these real time on a keyboard so that they sound as realistic as possible, even though they're supposed to be 16-bit, almost a cheesy sound. I always try to make them as musical as possible and not overly quantized and that kind of thing. And then moving on to the last bits here, what I feel really gives the power to this whole thing is the percussion section. So a shaker, as I've talked about before in my village video, a shaker is a powerful tool for keeping one consistent piece of energy throughout the entire track. Just instantly energizes everything. And then of course, adding some orchestral percussion is going to make a big difference too. Snare drums. And I also felt like in this track, because it's this big bad boss, adding a nice fat gong sound on the downbeats of these sections really just helps add a lot of momentum. And a couple of cymbals here and there, crash cymbals. And then adding timpani helps a lot, which are the big kettle drums. And similar to all of the other items, I play these in myself, so I'm okay if it's not 100% perfect, because I don't want it to sound overly quantized. I like to have real musical performances in there. And then last but certainly not least, one final element that helps glue the several sections together is adding the harp, which on my keyboard I just roll my fingers across. As you can hear. They're not even perfect, but that's fine. That's really all there is to it. But I add those in just to add some glue. And the final note is you'll notice I have an intro section that I created just for the very first time you start with the boss. But I set the actual loop of the track to go back to that A section after the outro. And to see how this works in the game, I'm gonna go back to this video, which was a gameplay demo. I'm not sure how to say this guy's name, but I think it's Ionix, which he did some pretty neat replay videos. You'll notice there how the B section with the big gong is actually timed to where the boss actually drops the floor open. And so it just works out really nice timing wise, which was a cool addition that the developers did, which I thought was really neat. One of those little subtle details. So that's how the track goes. I encourage you guys, if you want to listen to more of it in its entirety, you go to my YouTube channel. You can check out bits of the full soundtrack so far, and there's also a link to my Bandcamp soundtrack, which has a demo OST which has 8 tracks from the game so far on it. So I encourage you to check that out, and please go support the game. They really need some help